know if for some reason I'm talking to myself. So welcome to the November TMF reference model meeting. Very pleased to be able to walk you through where we are at the moment and, as I said, some of the exciting things that are going on. This is the agenda. So you can see that we have our usual. We have a membership update, and I will ask Eldon to do the membership update since he sent me all the numbers through. That's okay, Eldon. And then we go into our subgroups where we have people online. Then we'll ask them to unmute themselves and provide the subgroup update. Lisa's going to talk about the framework for destruction. And then Jamie and I are going to do a bit of a tag team in terms of the MHRA Q&A from the TMF Summit. What you will be pleased to know is that we have a summary document, which is everything that was asked and all the answers, which we've produced. And we have sent it back to Andy Fisher, who has then responded. And so we can then circulate it to you all. Well, we will actually put it on the TMF reference model website, thereby driving people to go to the website, and you can all go on there and have a look at it. We'll talk a little about the Magi ISF ETMF initiative. Betsy Fallon's going to give an update, and Lisa's going to do that. We've got an update on the FDA MHRA Data Integrity Workshop, and then a bit about the upcoming meetings. If anybody, as I said, has any questions, comments, etc., I'm just going to click mute all again so that I keep all the new people muted. Excellent. Well, we're at 108 people, which is fantastic. So let's start. Eldon, if I could ask you, would you mind giving an update on where we are in terms of numbers, and also anything you'd like to tell anybody about joining, subscribing, etc.?
Yeah, so this is partly just to make you aware that the group is increasing each month, and just gives you some updates on that. But also just to remind you that there are different ways of people getting engaged and involved in the project. So in terms of the core project team, so those are people who are actively involved in adding to, updating, revising the reference model, or are part of an active member of one of the sub-teams. We've got 247 people at the moment on the project team, with an additional 24 joined since the last meeting. We've also got a big list of subscribers. So those are the people who aren't necessarily active on a team, but are interested in the reference model and get newsletters, get notified of meetings, etc. So quite a big group there. We've also got an online forum, and we use Yahoo Groups for that. 568 members. We've had 11 new people join that since the last meeting. And that's a place where you can post any queries that you have about the reference model, or around kind of managing TMF documents in general. It's a fairly general discussion forum.
Sorted. I've just muted you again, Eldon. You need to unmute yourself.
Thank you. So that's a place where you can actually get involved in discussing things with colleagues. And similar to that as well, there's also a LinkedIn group with almost 3,000 members on that. And how all of these groups are arranged is actually described on the TMF reference model website on the join page. So if you're not sure which group to join, you can take a look at that as well. Okay, thanks.
Thanks very much, Eldon. 116 people. I'm just, as I said, I'm just going to keep them. I'll keep the mute button going. Don't forget, everything is on this tmfreferencemodel.com website. Please make sure you bookmark it. Go and have a look. It's nice to be able to quote how many people go and look at the site, but everything you need is on that site, ready for you to go to. Okay, so let's look at the activity of the subgroups. We've got a number of subgroups ongoing. The ones in sort of the peachy pinky color, we're going to talk about separately. Just as a quick comment, in fact, I meant to put a slide together on the survey. I do apologize. We'll talk about the survey in a second as well. The country-specific artifacts, we've closed off that particular initiative, just in terms of keeping some useful information, but not driving forward trying to pull together every document from every country, because it was just a bit too challenging and too changeable. The survey, again, apologies, I meant to put a slide on the survey in. Obviously, we're looking for people to join the survey team. I don't know whether, David Ives, whether you're on the call today. Or if there's anybody on the current survey team who'd like to say anything. But if not, we would very much like to have people involved in the survey. We're going to be kicking it off next year. And so you will no doubt see lots of emails from us on the survey coming out to get people. So anybody who's interested, if you can email feedback@tmfreferencemodel.com is probably the best email to go to, or me. Very happy for it to come to me as well, and then we can forward them on. It is very, very useful and very important that all the members on here get involved in the survey. JGCP, so we've had, this is the group looking at bringing together and aligning the Japanese GCP documents to the TMF reference model, and we've actually had some interesting feedback around some activities going on in Japan with the Japanese Pharmaceutical Management Association. So it looks like this is a group that will be able to drive forward this alignment, working together with us quite well. I'm not sure whether anybody who's on the JGCP group, Alison, Wendy or Jamie, whether there's anything that you want to add to that at the moment.
Hi, Karen. I think you covered it. We will be reaching back out to them and hearing their progress in January.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Jamie. So I'm going to, the only one to talk about is the Change Control Board. And as you know, we have released version 3.1. All of that's on the website. So we don't have anything specific to talk about around the Change Control Board today. And unless there is anything, any questions anybody has, which we'll come to at the end, or if there's anything that needs to be added by either Kelly or Joanne. So let's move on and talk about the first group. And Russell, as you provided me this slide, I'm hoping you're going to be on the call and be able to provide the update on non-interventional studies.
I am indeed, Karen. Thank you. So non-interventional studies team have been working reasonably hard, I think, and diligently at trying to get this up and running. We do actually have 55 relevant artifacts identified from version 3 of the TMF reference model in our non-interventional study reference model. 38 of those are marked as essential and 17 desirable. But the problem has really arisen with 127 artifacts that we have somewhat curiously marked as situation dependent. And this has led us actually to query the definition of a non-interventional study that we are using as the basis for this model. So we've halted progress to some extent to go back and revisit that definition so that we can agree the specific type of NIS that we're going to be using. There are a large number of them: observational studies, registry studies, disease studies, studies with IMPD and studies without, so that we can actually agree a list of artifacts for that specific subtype. And we're hoping from that to then go on to develop trial master file references for the other types as well. So at the moment, the preference is for a non-interventional study involving a medicinal product. And we're hoping to have that finalized by the end of next week, so that we can then continue to make much more rapid progress. To try and catch up time, we are looking at a face-to-face meeting sometime early in 2019, so that we can really start making some headway on this. But at the moment, it's all pushing on. We have slowed a little, but progress is being made. But it is a very complex area, particularly with the variance in regulatory requirements across the globe. But, it's a very interesting project, and it's been an education for all of us involved, I think, and we're very happy to welcome new members if anybody's interested in joining us. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Russell. I have to say that I think it would be good for you to do a little bit more detail at one of these meetings on the challenges that you've met, where you've said you've come across all these artifacts that are, you know, questionable as such, or depending. I think it would be a good conversation, because for those of us who don't deal with these sort of studies, it's probably a little bit in the dark for us.
Okay, I'll try to put something together for you for the next meeting, Karen.
Thank you very much. Fabulous. So the next one is sub-artifacts team. Now Karen's not on the call, but she very kindly provided me with an update. I have to say hats off to that. I think that she really has got one of the toughest groups, not in terms of the people, obviously, but in terms of the content, that what she's trying to do, which is put together sub-artifacts across the entire reference model. Their plan is to try and get it completed by the end of the year. There's a small group who are regularly participating, and they are very, very active. She's always looking for more people to be involved. So always, you know, if somebody thinks, actually, I've got some time, I'd like to have a look. I mean, even if you haven't been involved from the beginning, you can still go in and do some of the update. Once she's done all of them, so they've got to finish zone 10, and then 4 and 5 still need to be done. It's going to be consolidated in one Excel deliverable. It won't be out by the end of the year, that I can promise you, because it's then got to go through a full team review, and everyone's got to participate. And then it's also got to go to the steering committee and change control board for review and approval. And one thing I would like to say is that, you know, we've got 11 zones, and there are subject experts in all of those zones. So if you think about data management, stats, regulatory, ethics, anybody who's got that experience, or people who know that know people with that experience, please put them forward. You know, sub-artifacts are a really important thing. We don't want to bring out something that's overkill. We also don't want to bring out something that's missing things. So please, if anybody wants to get involved, email me, email feedback@tmfreferencemodel.com, email Karen Schneider if you know her, who's the lady who's running it, and see if we can get some more people involved. So thank you very much for your continuing involvement in that. Right, so, oh, absolutely, and Eldon just reminded me that they can join groups.io and then pick your selected sub-team. And if you look in the chat at the moment, Eldon is going to post where you go and join groups.io. Thank you, Eldon. Sorry to ask you to do that, but it's also on tmfreferencemodel.com. So that's where you can go and you can join the groups.io and then pick your selected sub-team. In other words, sub-artifacts will be your sub-team here. Devices. So Melanie couldn't be on the call. Melanie is running the devices group, and she's got 13 members who are actively involved. 9 of the zones have been done. 10 and 11 are being reviewed, and the initial review is to be done on the 6th of December. And then it would send us, obviously sending it to the steering committee and obviously the change control board, very importantly, by the end of January, early February. I hope that says early February. It's hidden behind people's names, but whatever it says on the screen. If you want to join the group, again, go to the thing. If you look at, everyone looks in their chat, you've got the link there where you go and you join the reference model, and that's where you can go and you can pick the groups that you want to be involved in. So please do that. And just so you know, for those of you who are interested, I don't know if you can see this, but we have 123 people on the group which is absolutely fantastic. Okay, so the next thing is the ETMF EMS, the exchange mechanism. I'm going to hand over to, I think, Ken and Paul to please go through these slides.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. This is Ken. I'll start out and then transfer it over to Paul. The ETMF EMS Exchange Mechanism Standard, it's a global standard for exchanging digital TMF content between different systems. And the Exchange Mechanism Subgroup launched the first version of the standard, the EMS standard, in June at the DIA meeting in Boston. And we've since turned our attention to testing and implementation of the standard. And to that end, we've started several forums to encourage communication among those who can benefit from the standard. So I'll talk about the first 2 of these, and then I'll turn it over to Paul to talk about the third one. First, we've been conducting a series of webinars. The first 2 that we have listed up here were sponsored by Globalto and Montrium, respectively. First one focused on sort of an overview of the standard. The second one delved more into the technical perspectives. Our third one we plan to do on December 13th at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. IQVIA is going to sponsor this. We're calling this one Getting Industry Engaged. We hope to circulate a survey to the people on our distribution list, the people who've attended previous webinars, to get some views that might help us in putting together a panel discussion. The panel discussion is going to be a panel of experts from IQVIA as well as others in the industry. We're firming up some of those plans this week, and we should be getting out the invitation to the webinar soon. If you haven't attended any webinars in the past, or if you haven't been at the launch event that was in Boston, you wouldn't be on our list. So if that's the case, then just go out to this link and submit the form that's there. It's a very simple form, just your name, your email address, and in the comment, just say you're interested, that you want to attend the webinar. We're going to have more webinars coming in 2019. Next slide.
Absolutely. Hang on, sorry, I'm just there we are.
Okay. The second forum I want to talk about is the LinkedIn group. This is something we just did, since the last general meeting of the TMF reference model. If you're on LinkedIn, all you have to do is go out and search for TMF Exchange Mechanism Standard. You can join the group and post questions. The lessons learned would be from people who are trying to work with the standard and want to share their experiences with it. This group was really started by Elvin Phelan, who is one of our co-leads of the EMS subgroup. And he, along with two other team members, Gif Sharika and Nick Cowan, have put this together, and they're going to be monitoring the discussions, and they'll be formulating answers to any questions that are asked. And as well as posting those on the LinkedIn group, we'll be developing a list of frequently asked questions. And so that's something that's coming that would be posted on a separate web page. So those are the first two really communication forums that we've put together to get us moving in the testing and implementation area. And the third one is the ETMF EMS Vendor Roundtable. And to talk about that, I'll call on our other co-lead, Paul Fenton.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Ken. And can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So obviously vendors play a very important part in getting the EMS off the ground, because ultimately their systems need to be capable of either sending an exchange or receiving an exchange of TMF content on behalf of sponsors or CROs. And so we felt that it was important that we have active engagement from each of the main vendors who are out there in the marketplace. And so we've contacted each of the vendors and asked them to participate in this vendor roundtable. And the purpose of this roundtable is really to work as a group in the implementation of the standard. So discuss, how each party is approaching it, if they have any specific questions or concerns around the specification from a practical or technical standpoint, they can also be discussed. The idea would be that we can also develop the roadmap together. So obviously vendors have lots of interactions with sponsors and CROs who are using their systems, and so we want to sort of try and gather that feedback and integrate it into a roadmap for the future of the standard and the evolution of the standard. And so the format really will be a monthly call, and each vendor will be represented probably by one individual who's playing a key role in the implementation of the EMS. We're also considering as a steering committee in putting together a way of recognizing compliance with the model for each of the vendors. So, you know, almost rubber stamping their implementation to say, yes, you know, they've implemented it in a compliant way and they're capable of exchanging files using the exchange mechanism. And that's something that's still being developed by the steering committee, but I think it's a nice way as well of recognizing the efforts of the vendors in implementing this, because of course it does require work on their end. So that's really what the roundtable is all about, and as we start to make progress, we will also be discussing that progress in some of the public presentations we do. So back to you, Karen.
Thank you very much. I think there is one more slide if you'd just like to run through this, maybe Ken or Paul, it doesn't matter, just about what the resources are.
Yeah, we have the published specification is out on the TMF reference model website, and we have the LinkedIn group, which I talked about. News about the standard is also out on the TMF reference model site. We have two links to GitHub, which is where we keep the technical resources for the IT people, the people who will be actually implementing the standard. And the last one is the same link that I mentioned before, that if you haven't visited or if you haven't attended a webinar yet, please let us know via this link, but you can also submit this link to get involved on the project as a volunteer, or to submit any questions if you're not yet on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, so the next thing to talk about is Lisa, the framework for the destruction of paper. In fact, Lisa, just hold on 1 second. I'm just going to mute everybody, and then you're going to have to unmute yourself. I'm just making sure that we keep the line clear. Okay, so go for it, Lisa. Now you can unmute yourself and talk.
Thanks, Karen. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to give you the second to the, well, maybe it's not the second to last, but I'm going to give you an update on the framework for the destruction of paper. And you can see here from our titles that we're approaching our finish line. So happy to report that the editing team is preparing the final document. And the target of the end of this month, which is the date of November 28th, is going to be met for the publication of the version 2 of the framework for the destruction of paper. The implementation team, the toolkit team, is working on the tools to support the framework. Different than last version, version 1. We have this implementation team, which is doing fabulous work. The tools that will be ready shortly at the time of publication will be the policy and the decision tree. And then shortly after, in December, by the end of the year, process maps and a workbook and a summary of changes will be coming. So these are all going to help the user to use, to evaluate and utilize the framework for the destruction of paper. But I do have to tell you that the team will continue into 2019, assessing if there's any other tools that are important. And actually those tools, that feedback could come through a survey that will be coming in 2019 as well. Actually, actually we're probably gonna have 2 surveys, one in January and one later on in maybe Q2, late Q2. So accessing to version 2 of the framework, the authoritative location is going to be the DIA website where the current version 1 is. Pardon me. But there's also going to be other locations. We'll make sure in December or through communications out to this group where those where the links are take you to get the document. And I can't leave this slide or talking about the project without thanking each and every one of the project volunteers. Some of the volunteers participated significant amounts, and some of them targeted amounts, but every one of the volunteers was critical to us reaching the school. It was a stretch goal, it really was, and we couldn't have done it with everybody's contribution. So I just have to again tell you, and the value and the power of volunteerism to get things done. So.
Thank you, Lisa. And I think the other thing that we need to say is thank you to you. You've helped run this, driven it, got it to where it is. So it's much appreciated by everybody in the industry, I promise you.
Thanks, Karen.
Okay, so the next thing to talk about is the MHRA Q&A. Now, Jamie Toth and I are going to tag team on this. So alternating slides, and Jamie did all the hard work. I asked the questions to Andy Fisher. This was so Andy presented in at the beginning of the first day, and then we gathered questions from everybody. And then Jamie very kindly typed it all up. We've sent it off to Andy Fisher, and he has agreed it. And so what we will be doing is posting it on tmfreferencemodel.com/resources, which is, I'm sure Eldon will again post the link just in case anybody didn't look at the link previously. And we're not covering absolutely everything. There's a lot more detail in the document, but hopefully this will give you an overview of what was said and sort of a general sort of consensus. So Jamie, over to you for the first slide.
Sure, thanks, Karen. So very exciting, especially the fact that Andrew Fisher allowed us to not only type up all the questions with his answers, that he then approved them. So when you go to the document, you'll actually see, as Karen mentioned, this is high level, but you'll see the 27 questions that he had responded to. You know, we can all use this as a reference point. So the first one, user-friendly eTMF features. So he likened this to paper. So being able to tag documents, sort in date order, see documents in folders in the system. He mentions kind of seeing it like in a binder view structure, if you will. Having an index that is structured, and then being able to compare documents. The next item was what was the approach for training inspectors. So he said as short as possible. They're very familiar with eTMF systems. He recommended that the vendors for these eTMF systems keep records of the inspectors who have been trained, and to provide that to the sponsors for subsequent inspections.
So the next topic, if I go to the next slide, was audit trails. And I have to say that it was the topic that got the greatest votes. We let everyone vote and say, well, what do you want to hear, etc. And I think part of the reason why it got such huge amounts of votes is because it's a real focus from an inspection perspective at the moment, when they're going in and actually inspecting them. People are trying to figure out what they should be doing with it. And his main focus was looking at the data and saying, do you have all the data? And I think this is really important from thinking not just about eTMF audit trails, but all the vendors that are doing all the work for you as sponsors or CROs, and then bringing in the data or the documents. But do you have all the electronic data or documents, and do you review them? Now, there was a question that was asked about, do you need to be going in and testing your system to make sure the audit trails are working properly? And the answer to that is clearly no, you don't need to be going in and testing your system, because that's what validation is about. But what you do need to be able to do is be able to use the audit trail to review what's going on. So there is an expectation that you would look at, for example, who's accessed documents, when they were uploaded, what was deleted. It might be, whoa, hang on, I'm just going to mute everybody. 1 second. I like this mute thing. Now you're all laughing, but Jamie has to keep unmute. You're going to have to unmute yourself again, Jamie. But they were very interested in all sorts of things associated with the audit trail. They did say, though, that the audit trail of the eTMF is not as high a priority as other systems. So systems where subject data is collected, whoopsie, hang on, hang on, sorry. Where subject data is collected, where, for example, a pharmacovigilance system or an EDC system. So for them, that was they're much more important data trails. They were quite happy that you would be looking at reports to have a look and see how the audit trail data is being analyzed. And then there was a lot of discussion about format. And So essentially what it boils down to is that they like Excel because they can play with the data, and they like to play with the data and be able to produce graphs. And everyone must remember the graphs that have been presented at many summits of showing, 10,000 documents going in the week before an inspection. But equally, you need to think about archiving, and you need to think about long-term storage. So therefore, the ability probably to transform it into some sort of PDF or long-term archive format as well, or whether you want to keep it in XML. But they were very definite about wanting to be able to look at the data and effectively manipulate the data. And the last thing about audit trails is that they should, when sponsors get them back, they don't have to be kept in the TMF, which was a question that was asked, but they just need to be somewhere that they can be accessed and reviewed as required. But they wouldn't be concerned if it wasn't actually in the TMF. There was a huge topic on Audit Trail. Was there anybody who was there? And obviously there's quite a few of us who were there. So like Paul or Jamie or Eldon or anybody else want to add anything about Audit Trails?
No. Yeah, Karen, I think that covered it.
Okay, fantastic. Right, let's move on to the next topic. So this is about, over to you, Jamie.
Sure. So this is about vendors, e-clinical vendors, because there's a lot of questions that asked about essential documents from these e-clinical vendors. So vendors such as labs and IVRS, etc. So they talked about these vendors and the majority having major findings in the past for essential documents, and that we need to define the long-term access to where those vendors' software validation documents are maintained, including any testing records or failure fixings and help desk tickets. But that also having an oversight approach to the sponsor's UAT was also necessary. And so being aware of where that UAT documentation was and how it was housed, so that you would have access to that if you needed to.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting one because they are actually now going out and inspecting e-clinical vendors. And that's not just, that's across the board. That's probably a bigger focus, I'm guessing, on things like EDC. But I think the world's going to change. I had a very interesting debate with Andy about help desk tickets and whether they should have long-term access to help desk tickets, which I'm almost guaranteeing that nobody actually gives long-term. You might give a summary of help desk tickets when your sort of contract effectively expires with that vendor, but long-term access is a bit maintained. How do you get them to make sure the vendors are maintaining it? So I think it's an interesting topic. Okay, so the next one, so this is our favorite one. So it's actually clarified in the document that this is changed. So this is different. What they're saying is not the same as in things have evolved. And what Andy was saying is that they've listened to our feedback and they've looked at the reality, and they've said, you know what, this is the certified copy process has changed, or their recommendations or requirements. So the first thing people want to know is, what is a certified scan process, which obviously we put in as it needs to be validated with QC, and those people doing it need to be trained. They clarified, I think most of us know this, but they clarified you don't need to sign and date a document to have a validated certified scan, because it's a process. Of course, you can sign and date it, but it's either signing and dated or following a validated process. They confirmed that a certified copy is not required if the original paper copy is kept. In other words, if your original paper copy is kept in your sponsor archive or at your investigator site, remember the TMF is the documents at the sponsor and the investigator site. That makes the whole TMF. And if a copy is, the paper document is kept in either one of those places, then you do not need a certified copy. Now, that's not saying you don't need a certified copy because of other reasons. if you're going to be making decisions based on those documents, you may say, well, actually, we want a certified copy for our own reasons, or if it's for legal reasons, but the regulators would not expect that. Of course, if you don't have a certified copy, they could always go back to the paper. Interestingly enough, they said, if you do a certified copy and you keep the paper, they wouldn't give you a finding, but they would actually say, why are you keeping the paper? Do you not trust your certified copy process enough to be able to keep the paper? So I think that's a sort of an interesting balance. But we did definitely ask and say, would it be a finding? And it isn't so much a finding as a why are you doing it? And if the paper has been destroyed and then there was an issue found, which was one of the other questions, what they would then do is go and say, okay, well, what's the issue? And is it indicative of a bigger problem? Or is it a one-off? You know, has a page been skipped and actually there's no other problem like that? Or is there actually genuinely a bigger problem? So they may dig a bit more into sort of from a data integrity perspective. Again, that was a very, very big topic of conversation. Sorry, I've just seen everybody's comments. Which is absolutely brilliant. Yay, yay, hallelujah, and all the rest of it. We will obviously be circulating that. And don't forget, this has been approved by Andy. He's made a statement at the top saying that it's not, you know, it's clearly not an official document, but that's really good news for everybody, I feel. Amy.
All right, so this is the next I think controversial topic is, I know we've been talking about documents in the TMF, draft documents in the TMF for many years. So there were a number of questions around draft documents. So what Andy said is, if you keep drafts and they're the only way to demonstrate that the organization followed an SOP, then you might be required to keep the draft in the TMF. And if you are keeping draft documents, then he also said that the MHRA do have the right to see those documents. So kind of, if you're doing it, make sure you are keeping them. If you let them know that you are keeping drafts, don't make it so that they can't see the drafts. So make it so that the drafts are viewable in the system, because they will want to see those drafts if you are keeping draft documents. I think that's about it on draft documents. Over to you, Karen.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the interesting one is that if they know you've got drafts, they will ask, and true MHRA style, if they ask, they get. So it's more of a warning than anything else. Signatures, just a couple of things. Now, we didn't have a big debate about signatures. There were a couple of very specific questions. Yes, thank you. I'm sorry, that's great. So there's a couple of very specific questions that were asked. One of them was, if you change a document, what do you need to do? Well, obviously the e-signature should be invalidated if you change a document, and then either re-signing or uploading a PDF corrected document. Very specific question. And the other question, which is one that they were asked quite a long time ago, but it came up again. If you have an electronic document, you know, 150-page plan, and then you have a signature page that's wet ink signed because that's your process, can you put both in the TMF separately? And the answer was yes, as long as you can tell that they are very definitely one document. So the signature page references every unique identifier that's required for the actual electronic document. So there's no, well, what is this document for? Okay. Jamie.
Yep, so we asked, there was questions about the TMF index. So does it need to be live, constantly updated? So he said that the detailed index is not required, just the top line index of where the documents are stored. He said that it is acceptable to see documents in different systems. So sort of having your system of record, your traceability of where your other content is would be advisable, because they will ask for that. But also to recommend, he recommended maximizing the documents in the primary TMF. So if you are able to put things in the TMF, then do that. If you're not, then have the system of record and that kind of like a traceability map, if you will, of where those other content sources are. And that those other content sources, they would need to meet all requirements for access, as well as long-term archiving. So if you're saying that, you know, your contracts document is in a different contract management system, then just being able to produce those documents is not enough. You'd also would that contract system would have to meet requirements for access and long-term archiving, as an example.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to skip, thanks Jamie, I'm going to skip to one of the questions, because there was a question, Daniel brought a question up, wasn't the issue with certified copies that the FDA do require a signature whilst the MHRA don't? I may call on somebody who's more FDA oriented. Fran, I don't know whether, or Eldon, whether you wanted to comment. I'm from the comments you said that it's the old definition and the difference between the regulation and the guidances. But Fran or Eldon, would either of you like to comment on that? Because I know this is a very hot topic.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I think the definition of certified copies that is used in the ICH addendum revision 2 supersedes the older definition that the FDA were using, which required a signature to verify each copy. And now that the FDA have bought into ICH E6 officially, then that's basically their latest thinking.
Fran, anything you want to add?
Well, this is Lisa. In the meantime, have we official information from the FDA that is indeed they're thinking that it overrides their earlier?
It's published in the register, so once it's published, the difference here, organizations need to assess if an inspector is going to come in with not a clear understanding and a different perspective. So it's a risk, people, and you know, it always depends on the human at the table. I think Eldon's point is perfectly the valid point. You need to rely on the regulations promulgated by ICH and the countries who then publish those regulations as the ones that they adhere to. As ICH, in my perspective, ICH trumps health authority.
And just to reiterate the point, when the FDA published their version of ICH E6, in the preamble, it said when this guidance is finalized, it will represent the current thinking of the FDA on this topic.
Correct, Amanda.
Does that answer the question, Daniel? Anybody else got anything else they want to mention on this? Perfect. I'm going to assume that is perfect. Okay, that's everybody. Thank you very much. Okay, so going to the next slide, emails. So there was a long discussion about emails, which actually culminated in a challenge to all of us eTMF vendors to come up with some super smart way that just automatically sorts them all out and categorizes them and makes them easy to read and all the rest of that sort of stuff. But actually, obviously emails are very important. The biggest thing is that they don't want a big sort of non-searchable file dump of all the emails. And concerns that sometimes PDFs aren't searchable, but you know, PDFs, if they're OCR'd, then you have some searchability there, but they obviously get used to using things like Outlook, and they quite like to be able to go through and find things. I think the most important thing is that there is an element of control put around how you store your emails, how you file your emails, and the ability to be able to get the story from the emails, because trust me, they do go through the emails. Obviously, if you keep things in an email format, which is the other thing that you could do, is that you've got to think about long-term storage. So we still haven't solved the problem of emails, but I'm sure one day we'll get there.
Yeah, certainly. Hopefully the future is coming, right, where email won't be as problematic to store. But things, technology and things like that improve almost on a daily basis. So, so speaking of future communications and other activities, Karen was trying to get at it, Andy, when the TMF guidance documents were going to be published. Karen suggested November 1st. He was not committing to that, and obviously it's now November 12th. So hopefully by the end of November, that TMF guidance document update is still in draft, but they were expecting it to be published imminently at this point. Andy did mention the MHRA blogs. They will not be formalized, but they are used just to communicate quickly, and those are used to build future guidance. He talked about e-clinical system guidance being produced, so that's something that will be coming. It's going to include a generic aspect of an e-clinical system, such as archiving, e-signatures, validation, certified copies. They'll have specific sections for IRT, ePro, EDC, but not for eTMF. And then just to mention that FDA inspectors have started to shadow MHRA inspectors. They're looking to also develop joint inspections. And I think some of you may have been at the data integrity session that was near DC right after the London conference, where it was FDA and MHRA. In particular, Andy was at that data integrity conference as well. So we look forward to more joint, not only joint inspections, but joint collaborations, I guess, with FDA and MHRA.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Oh, there's lots of things going on in the group chat, so I'm just going to have a quick catch up and see if you Google FDA joint inspections, I'm sure you can all see this. And oh, there's just some comments about relevant communications. So Russell, if the relevant communications guide is being updated, we will get you to present it at some stage in the future, which would be greatly appreciated. Okay, so now I've lost my mouse. 1 second. Right, the next slide. Aha! So the next slide actually leads very nicely into the next topic, which is around the EISF. And actually, I actually want to go back and clarify with Andy on this topic. But basically, the TMF guidance document will say that sponsor CRO personnel cannot remotely access an EISF because it has documents with patient identifiable information. What I don't remember, and I don't know if anybody else remembers, is whether it would be okay to remotely access the EISF, but only the documents that don't have patient identifiable information. And I must admit, I can't see why that would be a problem, but I'm not sure if anyone else can remember whether this was discussed. And while everyone's thinking about it, they were saying that that access when you're on site is fine because it's all about investigator control. Sorry, was someone going to comment?
Hi, Karen, it's Betsy.
Hey.
You know, we have talked about this in the past, you and I, probably in a very focused conversation, but I think you don't necessarily have to access the document in order to access the metadata about the document, which would not necessarily have the PII.
Right.
So, and I think that's absolutely fine. There's a lot of information about the documents that you could access. And I'll touch on this in when I give a summary of the other call as well.
Okay, fantastic. I just think it might be, because we've said in the summary, which is what Andy said about remotely accessing the ISF, but we haven't actually said what they can't see. So it might be worth doing a bit of a clarity on that. Maybe we could work together, Betsy, on that, just to make sure that we're really clear of what he was saying. Okay, so let's switch over to, that was the end of the Q&A. As I said, thank you very much, Jamie, for typing like crazy. And this will be on the tmfreferencemodel.com website shortly, if it isn't already there, because the chances it probably is. I'm just looking to see, it is already there. There are some more comments. I'm going to skip over the comments. Everybody can read them. But thank you, Eldon, for doing that. Okay, so Lisa, can I hand over to you to talk about the Magi ISF eTMF reference model initiative, please?
Hi again. Thanks, Karen. I'd love to talk about it. So we've brought this up before at this meeting, and to let you know that Magi which is a site-facing kind of support organization, is developing an EIS reference model. And the draft model is public. You can see the request for review is posted in that link below. It's developed lots of different reg binder lists. And you know, the sites do still refer to it as a reg binder, from the ICH, the NIH, our reference model, Magi, and ACRP, and also from the clinical sites. So they've gotten a good bit of input, and they are looking to combine all of that into a comprehensive kind of reference model for the reg binder, for the ISF. Pardon me. This initiative is created in partnership with Magi and ACRP and SOCRA, and includes a lot of industry, technology, consultancy representatives, but the focus really is on getting the most number of sites involved to review and provide comment regarding the EISF model. So like I said, it's posted. The recommendation is to provide input. You know what, if any of us would like to provide input, please do. I've provided input. We've had other TMF reference model representatives provide input, but also we're looking to get input from any site. So if you happen to be close to any sites, or your clinical team is close to sites, both US and around the world, we would really love to get that feedback. And in that publication, there is that that method on how you provide that feedback. But please look to it. Know that it's not finalized. There's a lot of things still to be finalized in it. But anytime feedback can be given, it's a good thing. So especially while it's in a development stage. So us as this TMF reference model steering committee will ensure alignment of the Magi ISF model to the TMF reference model, because we're driven to reduce that two different ways of doing things, that bifurcation. And we're gonna ensure that we align so that we can enable that record exchange through the exchange mechanism that you all heard about earlier. So I know that there's probably tons of comments, but go to that posting from First Clinical and start your understanding more of the Magi ISF. The timeline is probably a couple months. But I wouldn't wait. I don't know, you know. So go to it and provide your feedback, and get sites to involved. Get your clinical team to get sites involved. Pass along that link.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Anybody got any questions or comments or thoughts on this? Nope. Excellent. Well, we're really looking forward to being able to incorporate the output of this particular initiative into the TMF reference model, so that you've got the full set there. So thank you very much. Betsy, I'm really sorry, Betsy, you do have 5 minutes though, because I had very little to say at the end, or 4 minutes. So over to you.
Lovely, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
So this absolutely dovetails with a lot of what happened at the TMF Summit and some of the conversations that happened there. This was a two-day event last week in the US, which was the first ever public GCP collaboration. And one of the great things was, because this was held on government property, there was no fee to attend this, so which was really excellent. There were 150 people in the room, over 3,000 connections, so globally to 68 countries.
Wow.
Yeah, it was.
Wow. Sorry, I have seen your slides. Wow. Okay, sorry.
I'm sorry. Oh, for the FDA, whoever they hired to do the technology, it was stellar. The technology in the room, the technology to all of the connections. There are recordings. If you go to this link, there are slides from the day 1 and day 2. Mostly day 1 was the guts of it. Day 2, there were case study materials, but there are also recordings. You could listen to everything that was said. It's closed captioned. You could do whatever you want, but I mean, it was very, very well done. So they focused on 4 topics, and you've talked about these in conjunction with the ETMF, with vendor selection. They're truly what you've transferred the task to a vendor does not eliminate the responsibility and the accountability at the sponsor level. Has to do with making sure their systems are validated and usable, and audit trails. So all of these components were definitely traced through both days. Unblinding was very much key. And so this is a piece that really hinged on the IVRS, IXRS systems. Audit Trail was an underlying component to everything. But I think to take a look at these messages and see how they apply to the TMF. Certainly, the documentation around the vendor selection is required, and there's a reason for that. The unblinding and how you blind or unblind material in your eTMF is considered to be critical to the data integrity, because if you don't manage that really well and document how you're going to do it and the fact that you did it is really key. The audit trail was mentioned through almost every single conversation. They showed how they used it. They demonstrated this in the case study materials. A lot of it had to do with, the plenary was from one of the longtime FDAers who talked about studies where they didn't have good controls and how it really impacted the amount of integrity in the end study of the data. And it was all about a product not being approved. Data management was a component of it. So these are the four key categories that they talked about. They presented case studies on it. Again, 12 FDA speakers, but there were so many in the room. I can't imagine how many there were. Nobody counted because nobody knew. And like you said, Andy Fisher was there. Karen, there was absolutely a question that came up on Andy's slides, I believe. And I think we should collaborate on a response, because I think it's the same category where he's talking about remote access to the ISF. There was also a statement that said sponsors absolutely must not have remote access to the EDC. So, I think remote access is one of the benefits of systems, but what exactly about it should we not be doing? So I think that's really, I haven't sent my question back to him yet. So I think that's something we can collaborate on. There was a lot on joint inspections and joint collaborations. So if you look back in the documentation, this was a lot of the presentations were very, sorry for all that chiming if you can hear it. A lot of their presentations were very introductory level. This is what we're doing since this was the first ever. So they did talk a lot about, we do this with the MHRA, we do this with the FDA, we do a lot of training. I would like to hear some actual concrete inspections where we eliminated so many inspections because we accepted the other agencies' responses. But it seems a little soft in the value of it and exactly what's being expected. So hopefully that can move into a little bit more of a robust value to industry and clarity about it. We know they go through training together. We know they talk together. We know they meet quarterly, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's really great, but what does it mean to us? What's the value to industry, and what does that mean for industry? I'd like to see it go a little bit farther down in the details. But it was well done. They expect to do it again. I think, I don't know, I haven't heard from anybody who was actually on the virtual call as to the value of it and the opportunity to, they did send questions in. They didn't get to many questions at all because most of the talks ran over. But maybe if anyone was on the call, who's on this call, who was actually on the virtual call, if anyone was, I'd love to hear just how it transferred in that situation.
Okay, that sounds like an absolutely fascinating meeting. It may be something that we actually want to do a bit more at one of the next meetings. Betsy, I'll come back to you and talk to you about it.
Absolutely, it was great, but I don't know that there was, from the people I talked to, there were data managers, there were IT in the room. I don't know that there was anyone from TMF that would necessarily have had the view back into you know, the TMF space.
So Dawn said that Dawn, you were on the virtual call, and I realize we've gone over a little bit, so people may have to drop, but that's really useful. Let's take that offline. The other thing is, there's a question about where today's meeting's recording will be stored. I need to figure out how we get it out. It's stored in Zoom. I just need to figure out how we actually get it out. So I realize, thank you very much, Betsy, most appreciated. And I'm sorry that you were rushed at the end there. Let's just go through the rest of the slides very, very quickly. The slides will be available. There's conferences coming up, IQPC in Brussels, and then the DIA EDM Clinical Regulatory Operations. This is really interesting because it's one where they're talking about artificial intelligence, machine learning, applying it to the clinical space, data integrity, all sorts of around aspects like that. So the link's there if you want to measure. And then, of course, the good old EXL TMF Summit, where there's bound to be hundreds of us there. So see any of you there. So general meetings, we do have a concern that the 11th of February is going to clash with the DIA RSIDM meeting. So we might look at pushing it to the 18th of February. I will come back to you on that because I'm not sure whether there's, I think it's President's Day, and I don't know what that means. It's in my phone. I don't know whether that means a holiday or whether it's just if it's a day when everyone takes the day off or not.
It's both, Karen. Some companies observe it as an official holiday, and some take it as offer it as a floating holiday.
Okay, so we're going to have to make a decision because we need to work out on other dates, unfortunately. Anyway, we'll come back to you on that. And it's a big US holiday. Okay, that's fine. We won't. I thought it might be from my. Keep to the 11th for now. I'll let you know. And I realize some people might not be able to attend the 11th. And last two things, just to make you smile. This was circulated, and I don't know who else has seen it, but I could sing it to you. And I'm sure you'll be very entertained. He's making a list. He's checking it twice. Anyway, I thought that was very funny. And I'm sure that obviously everyone's very aware of the General Data Protection Regulation. And just a final thought from me is happy holidays to you all. And have fun, and we will see you in the new year. And anyone's got any questions or comments, then feel free to shout. So happy holidays, everybody, and enjoy. Bye.
Thanks, Karen.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
The next meeting is the 11th of February. So I've just seen a question. Pleasure, Francis. I like this messaging thing. Thanks, everybody. Bye. And Karen, if you're still on, absolutely, I'd like more information from Betsy as well. So I'll get that.